the accomplishments of our distinguished alumni. And speaking of accomplishments, wait till you hear this. Following his postdoctoral work, Dr. Gene Shearer joined the National Cancer Institute, where he has been a senior investigator in the immunology branch and experimental immunology branch for the past 24 years. Dr. Shearer is the chief cell metadated immunology section of the National Cancer Institute. He is ranked among 10 most cited AIDS researchers during 1993 and 1995, and the 11th for the AIDS researchers for citation impact. He was anointed to the National Cancer Institute AIDS Task Force Advisory Group and Research Council of the AIDS Institute of New York. And in his spare time, he has managed to author and co-author nearly 300 medical, periodical, and research papers. This year's final recipient is Dr. Gene M. Shearer.
But I've made lots of observations that I didn't expect that. That wasn't supposed to happen. And sometimes you can throw those things out, and a lot of people do, maybe. And I oftentimes get sidetracked and say, that's interesting, I'll go back and do that again. And if it works again, then you sort of say, you know, sort of like maybe the first man that walked on the moon, you sort of feel like, I'm walking where nobody else has walked, at least in this arena.
Dr. Gene Shearer is the principal investigator and section chief of the Cell-Mediated Immunity and Disease section of the National Cancer Institute's Experimental Immunology branch. In other words, he's one of the best researchers around.
You set up an idea, you go out and you test it, and sometimes it's right, and oftentimes it's wrong. And one thing that I learned when I was in Oak Ridge is that you do a lot of controls. A control is the part of the experiment that you think is not going to give you anything. In order to compare an experimental and make it meaningful, you need a control that doesn't change in your experiment. And oftentimes you find that the control tells you more than the experiment. You learn more from what you thought was not going to give you an answer than from what you thought did. And I think that reflects our naivety and to some extent our arrogance.
Dr. Shearer graduated from Western Kentucky University in 1961. He says he's thankful the school decided to take a chance on him.
I'd gone to Berea 1 year and had transferred to the University of Cincinnati in engineering and didn't do it all well there, and practically flunking out, and actually Western accepted me. And I spent my last 2 years there and got a degree in biology and chemistry. And then from there I went to graduate school. So I guess I was sort of almost a dropout out of college, and Western was willing to take a chance on me, for which I'm grateful. And
he says his family probably wouldn't have let him go anywhere else.
I guess I once told Kelly Thompson when I came back in 1991 that I guess I came from a Western family, because my mom and my dad and one uncle, my sister, and myself, and 3 cousins all graduated from Western. And so it's kind of a family thing, I guess. So.
Shearer earned his doctorate from the University of Tennessee in 1967, and in the process, he worked at the Oak Ridge National Laboratories.
I was introduced to, in that setting, I was introduced firsthand to research, to basic research, hands-on experience from day one. And I thought that was quite different than spending 2 or 3 years in class, day after day after day, and then starting a research project. So when it came time to do my thesis, it was essentially a piece of cake. There was nothing to it.
Upon completion of that degree, Dr. Shearer just assumed he would obtain a teaching job.
And my boss, who had seen me develop over the years as a technician, to ask questions in the right way, and he said, why don't you go to do a postdoctoral training somewhere? And he says, I think you could be an excellent researcher. And that surprised me, because I didn't really think I had that. And so with a wife and a baby son, we went to Israel for 3 years.
He came back to the U.S. in 1972. His talents and reputation landed him a job at the National Institutes of Health's National Cancer Institute.
He had made some very important fundamental discoveries in immunology in Israel, and he was already a superstar of immunology even 27 years ago. And Everyone was extremely excited when we managed to recruit him.
When I came, I was quite amazed that Gene Shearer was here and breathing and talking and walking in the hallways. And I was delighted to find that Gene not only was a great scientist, but was someone of exceptional humility and tremendous humor. I mean, Gene always was funny. And whenever we looked for someone to lighten the day, it was always to Gene, in fact.
After several years at NCI, a disease called Acquired Immune Deficiency Syndrome, or AIDS, was discovered, and Dr. Shearer found similarities between the project that he was working on at the time and the new disease.
So I was working in a mouse model of immune dysregulation where the immune system gets out of whack, and this mouse system looked like it had nothing to do with HIV or AIDS. And when I heard about the AIDS story, actually my wife read about it to me in the newspaper. I said, well, that sounds interesting. And when I got into it, I realized that there were some common denominators, or I thought common denominators, between the mouse model we were working on and AIDS.
And most of us who were virologists, and I was among them, really never looked at the whole idea that cellular immunity could play a major role in viral diseases. And Gene really opened up this concept, which has turned out to be absolutely major in the field.
Really completely changed his research to confront what he saw as a major problem facing humanity. And he was one of the very early researchers in AIDS, and has continued to be one of the leading researchers in AIDS. So his impact on the institution really can't be overstated. He really dragged the NIH into confronting the issue of AIDS, and was one of the leading scientists who were approaching it as well.
Yeah, some of the theories are still out there, and I think some of them are still controversial, but I think there's been some changes, some turning around in terms of what sort of an immune system might be protective in designing a vaccine or a therapy. I fight these battles every day, practically still.
Dr. Shearer certainly changed the face of AIDS research, but his other accomplishments are also great in number.
One of my main objectives now is to look at certain types of cancer which also suppress the immune system, and to see if there are parallels or common denominators between what we think we know in AIDS and what we think we know in these cancer systems. And so I'm kind of excited about that.
He has won numerous awards and has written or co-written more than 375 medical periodicals, research papers, or books since 1964, while serving on the editorial boards of 7 periodicals.
Gene has that remarkable spark of creativity that most of the rest of us wish we had.
1999 Hall of Distinguished Alumni honoree, Dr. Gene Shearer.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be here and to be part of the Distinguished Hall of Alumni. I guess I'm the 45th one, and one thing that I realize is that the other 4 who I have met here are very much down-to-earth people, and I'm very grateful for that. The other thing I wanted to say is that this is the first or only honor that I have had so far that has been awarded to me outside of the National Cancer Institute. So those 2 men who talked may have been somewhat biased. So for that, I am particularly grateful. A few things I wanted to make in terms of comments. I wanted to acknowledge 3 people who are graduates of Western Kentucky State Teachers College, as this place used to be called. And the first one is my mom. She graduated from Western in 1939 and became an elementary school teacher, interrupted her teaching career to have a family, to go follow her husband around the country during the war, and she taught me in the 7th grade in a 3-room school that had 2 teachers and a pot-bellied stove for heat. And she also taught my sister in that same school, grades 4 through 7. My sister Nancy Rust and her husband Bill Rust, graduates of Western who flew all night to get here. Thank you. But I would like to go back to before my school. In 1942, I was 5 years old, and Mother set me down, probably with some resistance from me, and taught me to read. She taught me to read well. She taught me to like reading. And she and I probably learned more about Dick and Jane and Spot and Puff and Sally than anybody in the country. And just to prove that she had taught me well, that September I went off to kindergarten at Norfolk Naval Base School, and I came home the first day so proud because I had a piece of paper signed by the teacher and by the principal. I'd been promoted to the first grade. Well, I thought by Halloween I should be in high school, at that rate. That wasn't to be. My parents thought I wasn't socially mature enough to enter first grade, and they held me back for a year. Now, I want to fast forward to 1946. We got through the war then, and my father came back from service, his education having been interrupted, took advantage of the GI Bill, and where did he come? He came to Western to finish his education, and he met a young man here who probably had a similar experience, a fellow by the name of D. G. Downing. They became fast friends, and when they graduated, Dr. Downing, who has probably worn more hats than anybody else at this institution, became coach of College High. My father went back to Wayne County and became coach of Wayne County High, and they continued their friendship over the years by playing basketball one year over here and 1 year over there, and it was a long trip. And although it may be the 56th anniversary of the Downings, I will share a little secret with you. Harriet told me last night that in one of those trips that her husband took over to Wayne County and stayed the whole weekend, she was about ready to deliver a baby. So you can see that the friendship was fast and strong. Well, my father retired from coaching in '54, and I graduated in '55, went to Berea. I got sort of cocky and decided to go to engineering school at the University of Cincinnati that I mentioned there, and literally flunked out by the time I had 3.5 years. And so we had the draft board then, and I was about ready to be drafted into the Army, and decided, well, I better try to volunteer for some branch of service that I could at least tolerate. And my dad said, stop. He said, I've got an idea. And I said, what's that? And he said, D. Downing's now registered down at Western. Let me talk to him. I said, it won't do a bit of good because I've already been back to Berea and they rejected me. I went down to UK and they threw me out the door when they saw my transcript. Janice can affiliate with that. And anyway, Registrar Downing sent a message back, send his transcript. I knew I was done then. But after some days, the word came back, a letter from Registrar Downing said, Dear Al, your boy's got terrible grades, but we're going to take him on one condition. He says the first semester he's going to be on academic probation. If he makes his grades, he stays. If he doesn't, he goes. Well, that first semester I made straight A's in all my academic subjects. However, I made a C, Dr. Harrison, in Ted Hornback's tennis class. Anyway, so you see, that's the way it went. Anyhow, through the support of Dr. Lank and Dr. Steve, who some of you remember, I graduated 2 years later with a double major in biology and chemistry and a minor in math, and went off to graduate school. And in summary, I would just like to say thanks to my mom for starting the Head Start problem several decades before the government thought it was good. Thanks to Dr. Downing and Western for giving me a second chance when no other school would, and thanks to my dad for believing in me when I couldn't. Thank you.